Okay, everyone, and welcome back.
Hello everyone, DarkSyner here.
And today, we're going to be doing a fireside chat. Basically, this is an opportunity for me to interview Sinner, talk about some of the decisions that he made in making his mod. What I've done is I have my playlist of the mod pulled up, and we're just kind of going to fast forward through. And when we hit on a point that I feel like needs addressed, we'll stop there, or I'll just have it running silently in the background. Nick and Bun, my two promo guys, I want to let y'all know if there is a scene that I feel like needs to be experienced in its entirety for the purposes of discussing it, be clip ready. So we're gonna start with the music of Amor Fati. Tell me about your decisions there, because there isn't a lot of it.
So there are two main decisions as to why I had went with a more ambient soundtrack for Amor Fati. The first and probably the main reason why is that I'm not exactly a musician by trade, so I don't really know how to make music myself. And obviously a lot of royalty-free music tends to sound samey.
Very much so, yeah.
So I decided to go with more ambient soundtrack. The second reason being is one of the goals I wanted for the mod was I wanted to feel empty and lonely, and I felt that music would have kind of, I don't know how to put it exactly, but it kind of would have taken away from it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree 100% with what you did, especially because, you've got the whole mod, virtually the whole mod, where you're not experiencing any music, right? There's just nothing but that ambient sound. And I feel like it absolutely 100% gave that sensation of hollowness, because the character feels a little isolated. Nacho, welcome to the stream. But once you get to the crescendo of the mod, right, the climax, the most important, emotional, intense sequence, that's when the music comes in. And I felt like it really emphasized the intensity of that sequence by the way you did that, especially since when the music does come in, it is overwhelmingly loud.
Yeah, that's also another thing is like I wanted to give more emphasis and weight on those moments where music does play.
Right. Like earlier in the mod, like right here, I believe you do have some of the standard run of the mill Doki Doki music playing early on in the mod. So it lulls you into that false sense of security. And I feel like you did that very, very well. The next topic I wanted to pull up, we are already currently at, and that is the introduction of Yuri. When you first meet Yuri, she is her standard Dandere self, but there's a little bit of a twist. And I like that you open it with a joke. Fans of Doki Doki will recognize that there's a joke here, and that is when the MC sees what she's reading. The painting of Marcus. Why did you do that?
Well, one, obviously a joke, and two, I kind of wanted to like butcher the name a bit just so it would imply that like MC sort of remembers it, but he doesn't really.
Mm-hmm. And it did kind of come across as a little bit of comic relief, kind of like a moment to go, hey, this mod isn't going to be 100,000% serious. Just a little bit of kind of a jab. Why, when you have a mod that focuses so heavily on Sayori and Monica, why did you feel the need to mention Portrait of Markov or even include it in introducing Yuri's character?
I don't have a very like definite answer, but if I was to say right now, it was just that usually when you play a mod, you usually associate the portrait of Markov with Yuri, so I thought that might be a good starting point, like start somewhere familiar with her.
Okay. This is just kind of an offhanded statement, and if you have any input there, of course, feel free to include it. But why is Natsuki such a cunt?
Okay, so I've had this talk with Paragon for and other writers for months, and I just honestly did not know what to do with her character.
Mm-hmm.
Like the more time I spent working on Monica and Yuri's character, I didn't have as much time to develop Natsuki's.
Right. Right. And that happens to a lot of mods, when you have a higher focus on one or sometimes even two dokis, the other two, or at least one of them, kind of ends up on the cutting room floor, so to speak, because you put so much high focus on different ones that there's always a casualty. So since the mod is a Sayori, well, it's touted as a Sayori mod, and there's a high focus on Sayori and obviously Monica, plus the decisions you made with Yuri, naturally Natsuki's gonna be, kind of a sacrifice there. And that's what a lot of people do when Natsuki's your throwaway. She just ends up being a bitch.
Yeah, is that right? I just internally just say, yeah, Natsuki in this mod is pretty much Asuka Langley.
Now I've got the conversation, that first real conversation with the club playing in the background here, and you get to see glimpses of what you're doing with Monica, and this happens throughout the progression of the mod. Is there's this just steady progression of Monica's character overall, as well as her relationship with the MC. And I wrote myself a list this time because when I did the FireSide for original exit music, I didn't have a list. And so it was kind of unbridled chaos. And I made a very deliberate point this time to actually have a list. And I'm not going in the order that I had originally intended, but just stopping briefly at the character of Monica. In these early phases of the mod, what was going through your head with regard to her?
The only thing I can say about Monica's character early on was I wanted to write her with the intention of not being sentient.
Now, the next point that I really wanted to go for is Yuri. And we're gonna spend so much time here. So Yuri in the mod is a practicing Stoic. I have heard so many fellow Urians absolutely lose their shit over this. And I'm perplexed by it. Like, yes, I understand the Urians that are more partial to her Act 2. They like the yandere a little bit more than the dandere. I understand that they would be troubled by this. But for me personally, I get it 100%. As the new folks might not know, I am a real-life yandere. Very passionate. When I have an interest, I obsess like mad over it. For me personally, one of the things, just as an individual getting around in this world, trying to understand the world, one of the things that I struggle with the most is my emotions, because they can go so crazy in just a matter of seconds that trying to have the ability to control what I'm feeling and how my feelings are being communicated, having that ability would be huge for me. It's a really, really big deal. And to take Yuri, and this is essentially Act 2 Yuri, but it is post-game. to where she has had her brush with death. She has had, the cutting and all of that, and she has found a way to cope with it. And her means of coping is Stoicism. So for me, I feel like that decision made 1000%, like, so much sense to me. So why don't you go ahead and just talk about your decisions here?
Okay, so the first thing I had, the first reason why I had made Yuri the way she is in the mod is due to the fact that the narrative background behind the entire mod revolves around the thought experiment of eternal recurrence.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I had, like before I even started writing this, I had to listen to a lecture, which you can find a link to in the credits mod itself. Anyways, this lecture mentions how that that when Nietzsche was writing Eternal Recurrence, that Amor Fati was one of his answers to it.
Amor Fati, the concept just as a whole.
So I was doing some research and I found out that Amor Fati has its roots in Stoicism. So I thought it would make sense to have a Stoic character to sort of present that idea to MC. So I thought out of all the characters, I would probably want Yuri be that candidate.
Because it makes total sense. I mean, what she goes through on a daily basis and what she went through in this mod specifically, the fact that her brush with death was very, very close. But I feel like you made the best possible call there. Since we are talking about Amor Fati, just give us the basics, like Stoicism 101. What is Amor Fati?
Amor Fati is a Latin phrase, translates to love of fate. And the thing about it is when it's not just like simply submitting to your fate and saying, this is the way it is, I have no control over it. It's more like a way of saying, I'm going to be put in horrible situations, but I have a choice in what I want to do about it, and I choose to accept it for what it is. And I was like, it's not just like Yuri explained this in the mod. She says that you can have goals and ambitions, perhaps just not dreams.
Yeah, like it's not so much a apathetic, just okay, well, shit's gonna happen, it's whatever. It's actually a respect and an appreciation for it. It's that you are literally giving your fate the respect that it deserves and appreciating it in spite of the fact that your fate might lead you down some negative paths.
Yeah, like that exactly.
And I feel like that was I love this mod. And you're gonna hear that a lot today. But I 100% just the decisions that you made there. Okay, so here Meditations is the book that Yuri is reading. For those who might not be familiar, what is Meditations? Because I know that's a real thing.
Meditations was a journal written by Marcus Aurelius, who was one of the founding fathers of Stoicism. Like, if you just look up the topic in general, his name will usually be associated with it.
Right.
And it's more like his, like, teaching, so to speak.
Right. Okay. And I feel like that was a really good choice there. I've way back when I have read some of his work, and it's fascinating. For someone who enjoys philosophy and learning about all the various different ways of understanding this thing we call life. His observations are definitely intriguing. What I'd like to do, because this is one of those topics that's just such a big deal, is I'd like to open things to chat right now. I've been watching y'all interacting. Does anyone have any questions for Sinner specifically regarding Yuri's Stoicism? Does anyone have anything that they don't feel like has been answered?
Why did Dark make his Amor Fati demo pretty much act one of the OG game instead of making the demo shorter version of this new story. Okay, so I was kind of like, the demo was like written with, was like the first draft of the entire mod, and I was not really thinking entirely straight about where I was going to take this story. The only thing I really had was the name Amor Fati.
Okay. So you were still kind of running blind at that point.
Yeah.
And I love the way Via articulated just the basics of what this mod does, because so many people talk so much about the philosophy and the religion and everything associated with the mod. They don't realize what the mod really digs into, and it's one of my favorite parts. And that is MC's descent into madness. And it really is a study on the psyche of what someone would or could be feeling when put in this situation. And that's one of the reasons why I love it so fucking much. Because everyone knows I love crazy characters. It's one of my favorite things to voice. Since we're on this screen, why? Why Armor Fatty?
It's a joke I've been hearing since I started developing the mod, like 14 months, like back in April of last year.
Wow.
Like, I've heard Armored Fatty, like, so many names.
Wow. So, like, there were a lot of different. But this is a common play on words about it, then.
Yeah, plus, I figured I might, like. Plus, like, another reason, like, sort of, is that, like, Siri wanted MC to join the club because she wants him to mingle and make friends.
Right.
So I was thinking that maybe Syria was eavesdropping on MC and Yuri's conversation about Amor Fati.
Okay.
So
Nice. Bun Bun, thank you very much for that link. Who is Dark's favorite Doki? Yeah, go ahead and answer that.
I am a Sayorian,
Not surprising.
despite making a mod that kills Sayori a bunch of times.
Right, and actually, I kind of want to dig into that. Like, as a Sayorian, like, I understand the story that you want told here. But how, well, I guess, how did you come up with the idea of actually wanting to portray her death? I mean, couldn't you just have suggested it? How did you put yourself through that as a Sayorian?
Like I say, Sayori is my favorite character, but like I don't have that like emotional attachment to her where I'm like, no, I can't write this because she's my favorite girl. Like I'm
Right.
sort of willing to let those feelings go and not compromise the story I wanted to write.
So it's more of a preference of her as a character as opposed to having her as a waifu. Is that right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay. And chat, please feel free to continue asking questions. I see you guys are kind of starting down that path, and please go ahead. Nacho's wondering, what is your all-time favorite mod?
Obviously, I probably like, I don't have like a favorite, but if I was like one I have the most fond memories of, it would probably be Salvation.
That's also not surprising.
I also enjoy Fallen Angel. Like,
Right
that
on.
was good, despite the hundreds of references, which
Fallen Angel gets dark, and not unlike your name, you, like me, have a very dark understanding and appreciation of media. So it's no surprise that you're a fan of Fallen Angel, because it definitely goes to a place. So the next point that we're on here is Monica. You write her as a Christian.
yes, I severely butchered her character.
Go ahead and go into more detail there.
Okay, so the reason why I made Monica a Christian in the mod is that, well, one, she's not sent, well, minor point, but she's not sentient in this mod, so it can make sense she could practice a religion. But the main point is, as I mentioned before, of Yuri's character,
Mm-hmm.
the narrative backdrop for the entire mod revolves around eternal recurrence.
Hmm.
And when that was proposed way back in the day, it was essentially rejected by the church. And so it
Right.
kind of contradicts the whole
Heaven, hell. Yeah.
heaven hell, like life cyclically repeating itself, that eternal recurrence would apply, whereas Christianity would imply that the life, like you live your life, you die, and you go to the afterlife.
Right.
So I
So
kind of
point.
wanted
Go
a,
ahead.
so I wanted a sort of counter argument for that.
Exactly. And spoiler alert, people, Monica's the bad guy. Um, but in making her character the antagonist, naturally you would want a character that would function in exact opposition of the protagonist. And since the protagonist is experiencing this eternal recurrence, you would want something to combat that.
I wouldn't say she was more of like an antagonistic figure. I'd say it's more like
That's
she's
fair.
like the other side of the coin
Yeah.
to.
Because we all know who the real bad guy ends up being. And we'll definitely get to that when we get there. But another decision, another big controversial decision that you made that I support 100%. It only makes rational sense. And I love that.
Plus, I know I really don't see many people like talk about or like say like this is horrible. Why would you do that to Monica?
Oh, I hear it. I have a lot of Monican friends, and they don't like the direction you took there with, I mean, well, all of it really. They don't appreciate her religious choice. They definitely don't appreciate what you do with her. Like, I know Telom specifically, you ruined him for a full day. um so yeah, here's where MC looks for something regarding Stoicism and starts having issues with it. Moving forward, so yeah, MC sits down with Yuri and tries to understand Stoicism. Um, it kind of almost makes him look unintelligent if you look at it from a specific way. So tell me about that.
I think this is like the start of his like this is pretty much the start of his journey. So it would make sense that he would sort of struggle and not fully understand what Stoicism truly is.
Right. I mean, not to mention the fact that his mental. The compromise of his mental health is already in progress. It's already begun. He's already seen Sayori die once and come back. So not only is he trying to understand a unfamiliar sense of philosophy, but at the same time, he's just trying to understand what the fuck is happening. So it's going to reasonably slow his ability to understand all this new information because it's a whole bunch at once. Aztec, welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us. So we're going to move on to part two. And oh god, did you have fun with part two? So at this point, the club already knows. He's already told everybody what Sayori's dealing with. This morning that Sayori wakes up and is still having trouble dealing with things, but she says, I'm really tired because I was up all night on the phone with Yuri. So she has this telephone conversation with Yuri, and then the following morning MC finds this. She's in the kitchen. She says she has to wash dishes, and she ends up cutting herself. Walk me through your decision making here. Why did you go this route?
Right. So this was something I had written down when I was again for just first starting writing it, and I kind of figured, well, maybe there's like an I sort of had this idea like, well, Yuri keeps mentioning how that she was in a similar situation to
Right.
Sayori, which prompts her to have that phone conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, since Sayori is one severely tired, she's like 2 3 hours of sleep,
Right.
but she also like has this revelation that MC and the club knows about her depression,
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't know about it. So she's obviously like having all sorts of emotions going on.
Right.
So like I kind of figured she would probably like, I know it's like very out of character or something.
That's part of the reason I'm asking, yeah.
Basically, I can boil it down to is that Sayori sort of like took Yuri's advice the wrong way.
Right, which is something Sayori would do, right? She's a little absent-minded, you know. She doesn't always have the right line of thinking about things, or she just doesn't understand. And especially when you take a character that is such a profound intellectual, such as Yuri, and you have her pose this information, you know, I'm sure she probably stuttered and stammered her way through the entire conversation. So, her being able to deliver the point she was trying to make met with Sayori's inability to receive the information, and it resulted in that scene. Am I kind of right there?
Yeah, on the right line there.
And again, a great decision for the mod. Um, must slow down and make sure that we're not lapping people. Does anybody have any conversations about anything that's been covered so far? Conversing, golly, I can't talk today. Questions about what we've covered up to this point?
It's just
Because,
a
go ahead.
just a side note while we wait for questions. I'm honestly surprised that I'm sort of surprised people don't mention to me, like people don't like talk to me about this scene where Yuri slaps MC across the face, because again that would be severely out of character for Yuri,
Uh,
if to me at least.
I think it's out of character for her in this mod.
Oh,
And look,
thank you.
there's the question right there. Why did you do that?
So obviously, I had portrayed Yuri as a stoic, meaning that obviously she's rational and part isn't as emotional, and
Right.
I soon realized that she's a human being. She's not going to be perfect. So
Mm-hmm.
I sort of wanted that one opportunity where she's going to act out of emotion.
So this is, and I'm what I'm doing is I'm addressing Nick's question. Um, this again, MC has already witnessed Sayori die once. His mental health is already compromised. So with her not slapping him back, I think at the time he was so startled. Yeah, and there it is. There's the hit. He was so startled by the fact that he had been struck that he couldn't react fast enough. He was just trying to process that information.
Plus, you don't hit girls.
Also true. Now, MC makes a comment here that if you're a twisted fuck like me, you're going to notice. Why not only, Nacho, not only do you have Yuri delivering this type of a character in order to make MC think this way, but you're also giving MC an appreciation for it. Why is MC so all about Yuri being maternal?
I guess my reasoning was that Yuri is sort of the person that has the answers MC's looking for. So
Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and ring those bells. That's all I have for today. Thanks for listening. Bye bye, everyone.